Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Monday, February 14th, 2022. And today I'll be sharing true paranormal stories from the web. As always, to find all episodes of the podcast and links to social media, ways to donate, and other ways to contact me, you can visit the podcast page, which is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. And of course, I'm always looking to hear from everyone, whether you have comments or questions about episodes, so comments, questions, or topic suggestions. Sorry about that, lost my train of thought there. Or if you'd like to share your stories for the podcast on the podcast, whether it's in the text form that I will read, or if you want to be on the show with me, you can find all that contact info there and go from there. Always happy to hear from you all. So, it looks like everything is going okay with the recording, which is good. And I guess that means I can get to these stories here. So, and of course, just for anyone that doesn't know, on Mondays I've started finding stories that don't quite fit the ghost story category really well. They're just paranormal, but they're not necessarily ghost stories. Or at least they don't seem to be. And I've been enjoying these episodes because there really is some other stuff out there that's just as interesting. And just as hard to explain. So we'll get going here. So this first one is a short one. This one says, "My mom and I both heard it this morning. It was clearly downstairs in our living room. It wasn't our neighbors, and it wasn't outside. It was 100% in our house." And I forgot to include the title of the story. It basically says that this writer heard the sound of something made of glass shattering. So that's I guess I should include the title sometimes. So it wasn't our neighbors and it wasn't outside. It was 100% in our house. We do not have a big house, and we scoured the entire place. There was absolutely nothing broken. We are still mind blown about this entire thing. Any idea of what this could have been? A ghost or a glitch in the Matrix? So basically, the story is about these two people, this mother and daughter, mother and writer, doesn't say anything any more than that, but these two people hearing the sound of shattering glass in their small house and then not finding any glass, which is odd. I had that experience here in my apartment one time. I was sleeping in my bedroom at the time and converted it into a storage area yet. And this one night I just heard what sounded like some kind of really big glass dish or glass something or other hitting the ground and just shattering. And that's a big deal for me in a way because I'm legally blind. You know, I only have a couple of glass things in my apartment at all. And I'm very careful with them. So of course when I heard that, I woke up the rest of the way real fast and I came out here into the rest of the apartment, and of course there was nothing there. So it's really odd. I don't know what to make of that. But yeah, it's just really odd. So, and I think I've heard that before, people hearing crashes or booms in their homes and then not finding anything. But um, in particular, the sound of the glass breaking, that's really odd. So, again, it was a short one, but I had to share it because I've had experience with that. So, with that, I'll go on to the next story. This one says, I have been a witness to a lot of paranormal and unexplainable events in my life. And it's not that I go looking for it or anything. I just always seem to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Honestly, I would think myself Looney Tune if others hadn't shared some of these moments with me. One day, my wife, a friend, and I were sitting on the couch watching who knows what, I guess on TV, and having a discussion about something when my wife stops mid-sentence and says, "What the heck is that? Is that a spider?" She pointed at something, but at first my friend and I didn't know what she was trying to point at. Then we saw it. In the center of the living room, there seemed to be something small and black hanging in the air. We all at first thought it was a spider or some bug. My wife was afraid of spiders, so being the man of the house, I step up to remove the pest from the premises. When I got up and approached the thing, I quickly realized it was in fact not a spider or a bug. What I was looking at was, to me, what seemed like a drop of tar black ink suspended in the air. I said, "Guys, this is not a spider. Look." I then proceeded to wave my hands around it, above and below, and there was absolutely nothing holding it in place. Being either incredibly brave or stupid, I went to touch it when my wife screamed, "No, don't touch it. Are you crazy?" I stopped short, but not because of her. As I was going to touch it, I saw a movement from this ink. It was your typical teardrop shape, but the skinny top part of the teardrop was moving around like a squid tentacle. This was some, for real, Marvel's Venom symbiote looking stuff. I pulled my hand back and I sat back down on the couch between my friend and my wife. And for the next 5 minutes, that felt like an hour, the three of us, if I can talk, that'd be good. The three of us sat in total awe as this black ink floated about 7 feet from the center of the living room, past all three of us, through the storage room door, which was closed. It just dematerialized. Can't talk tonight. Right through it. My first question was, we all saw that, right? Of course, they had. My wife was the first to see it. My friend left immediately after, and my wife and I, still to this day, talk about the mysterious ink blob that floated through our living room. Crazy stuff. And that is odd. I don't know what to make of that one. It's interesting that it was just this floating darkness. Doesn't sound like it was they didn't say there were anything about it being a shadow, but I wonder if it had any dimensions or if it was some kind of a miniature shadow being kind of thing, or what it was. So I don't know. That's really interesting. I see you all in chat. Thank you for coming. Apox says I had a boom and then a dragon rumble or roar. Yeah, that's referring to that first story. Yeah, I don't know. It's really odd. Um, sounds can. It's amazing how there can be these sounds and yet there's no evidence of whatever made them. So but yeah, it's interesting that they mentioned the comic books there in that second story. The whole idea of this basically sentient dark substance, almost like I think the term is black goo. Although this seemed to be um, didn't seem to be solid, whatever it was, or it could change from being solid to not being solid. I guess I don't know, but yeah, very interesting. So, all right. Well, we will get to the next story here. This one says, I must apologize for not having a picture, despite one very obviously having been taken, according to my memory. Also, I would like to provide some context. I was staying in my aunt's new trailer on my cousin's property. This property has been rumored to be haunted since my aunt and cousin moved in there over a decade ago. Different friends of my cousins claim to have seen shadow figures in the house, and my mom and aunt claim to have seen a yellow cloaked dark figure at different points in time. Anyway, the point is it has a history, or so it would seem. And I just want to stop there for a second and say I've heard of dark figures, but never a yellow cloak. That is very interesting in a way. I mean, you always hear of these figures being either a black or, if nothing else, like a dark brown. But that's an interesting detail. So, getting back to the story, this says, so I was staying in my aunt's trailer, parked next to the house, under some trees. Everything went normal until the last week of my vacation. One day, a terrific storm hit the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where I was staying, and I was in the trailer. Suddenly, I thought to myself, you should probably get out of here. The storm is getting bad. So I did. I went into my cousin's house, just when said cousin didn't see me, and went to go grab me to take me into the house. The next second, my cousin came back inside, and I heard this thunderous noise. A tree had fallen on the trailer, while no other trees had been disturbed. My cousin and I both could have died that day, yet we made it out alive. I don't know if this really counts as paranormal, but given the history of the house, I felt like it might have had something to do with the entity supposedly seen by so many. It is often described as being a guardian, and I sometimes wonder if it didn't like there being a trailer on its property, but also didn't want to kill anybody in the process of ridding the affront. I suppose it is all speculation. And that story brings up an interesting point. Are there beings out there, entities out there that can manipulate weather to the extent that it can also bring a tree down onto basically a target? Um, I thought that was a really interesting and somewhat frightening, possibly, idea. But the uh, the way that one tree came down on that one trailer, is very interesting. Obviously, random things happen, but given that there was already a history of strange things on the property, and I just heard a voice real quick. I don't know where it came from. Interesting. Um, I didn't even hear a word. It's just a sound of a voice. But anyway, that's interesting. Um, so APOC says probably interesting idea, and it just I wonder because I mean, and they bring it up in the story themselves. So, um, yeah, I don't know. That's really an interesting idea. Something maybe to look into. You do hear about different storms and even like hurricanes and tornadoes just taking sudden turns in places, and it doesn't seem likely that that would happen, but it happens. I wonder if that was just a version of that on a smaller scale. Um, so I don't know, but depending on how old this entity was that was on the property, maybe it didn't like the look of the trailer being there. Um, yeah, I don't know. Didn't sound like me, but maybe it was. But anyway, so yeah, very interesting. I think I have to cough. I'm gonna mute the mic here for 1 minute. Okay. Um, but yeah. So I thought that was a really interesting story. And I brought up an interesting idea. So, anyway, we'll go on to this next one. And okay. This one says, yesterday I was driving home on roads that I've taken several times before. All of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge fireball appear out of nowhere. It made no sense to me at all. It was easily the size of a human torso. There was no sound, and nothing I could have mistaken it for otherwise. There was just a random ball of fire, and it was floating above the ground when it appeared, so there's nothing that could have shot the fire into the air. Any ideas on what it could have been? And that's an interesting one. Um, I don't know what that would be, but you hear of things randomly appearing like that, either lights or, I guess, fireballs in the air. Um, so, I don't know. Um, doesn't say where it went or if it moved at all or if it just stayed still. I guess if they saw it just for a second as they were driving, maybe they couldn't really track it. Um, because they had to pay attention to where they were driving, obviously. But um, that is that's interesting. So, kind of, I guess you could maybe call that a UFO. Maybe I don't know. So this next one says, 4 or 5 years ago, I was new to my city after moving to be closer to family. I'd only lived there for about a month at this point. I'd just gone to an appointment and was waiting at a bus stop to go and see a friend when this girl walked up. She looked exactly the same as me. She had the same hair, cut in the same style. She had the same tattoos, which I found strange because I designed one of my tattoos myself as a personal memorial for a relative who had passed. She had the same, she had the same mole above her right eye. She saw me looking at her and asked if I was okay. I asked her who her tattoo was for. She told me that it was for her relative who had passed, and that she had designed it herself. And she gave me the same name as the relative. I guess that passed for the writer of the story. The bus arrived, and she got on, as did I. We talked the entire journey. We started asking each other questions and answering at the same time. All the answers were identical. Did I meet my doppelganger? And I've never heard of quite that close of a resemblance. It sounds like they met their mirror image. I'm interested though in the fact that at first this other person did not seem surprised. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But I just thought that was a really interesting one. I don't know how to explain it. I know they say that there's. I think I've heard this before. Everyone has someone that looks just like them, but that is. I mean, does everyone have someone that looks exactly like them, even down to the clothes and the tattoo and the hair and everything? Of course, I don't know. But I thought that was. It must have been really strange to have that happen. I've heard of doppelgangers, but it seems more like usually the person doesn't meet their own. It seems like it's usually other people that claim to have met this doppelganger. They basically other people tell the person that we talked the other day, and then it turns out they didn't. So interesting. Apoc says I was told I had one in high school. Never met her. Yeah. So I don't know what category, if any, that one falls into. And that's okay. It doesn't have to fall into a category. So, but we'll move on to the next one. I think we'll at least get this one done. Might get through all of them today. We'll see. So this next story says, I have a memory from when I was about 5 to 7 years old that keeps popping up in my head lately. I was on a road trip with my grandparents in the Midwest of the United States. This would have been around the mid-90s, but I am positive it was before 98. On this road trip, we would have been traveling through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. I remember we were driving through one of the many areas that were surrounded by vast open fields. Probably farmland or something, but I do not remember seeing the neat rows of plants that one would see when passing a farm of any kind. It was more just a vast open field on either side of the car. Kind of a two-lane highway, middle of nowhere vibe. Common amongst any drive through the Midwest. Anyway, I look out the car window, and there are these little dwarf-looking creatures with very big, droopy hands, just sprinting around the open fields in circles, with their hands hanging lazily in front of them as they ran. They were wearing blue or red, as in some were all blue, some were all red. But their skin showing was Caucasian-esque. At the time, being like 5 or 6, I thought they looked like Dopey from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They all had little caps on their heads, like he wore, and they all had big, oversized robes in either all blue or all red, from top to toe. The huge floppy hands were sticking out of their oversized sleeves, and just like hanging, uh, limp wrist hanging, excuse me, out of their robes as they were prancing around this big field area. Nowadays, I have a better comparison. They're almost a spitting image of the little minion things in the game League of Legends, even down to the way they run. So picture that, but if they were real. But the things I saw almost resembled something like if a stuffed doll could run and prance. The floppy hands reminded me of where the wrist is sewn on a stuffed doll, and the doll hand just kind of flops around. I asked my grandma what they were. She had a cryptic tone and said, "They're in jail. That's why you don't want to go to jail," or something like that. But I distinctly remember her saying those things were in a jail of some sort. Later on, when we got to our destination, I asked my grandma what she meant, and she couldn't remember what I was talking about. She chalked it up to me being asleep and dreaming, but I could have sworn that I was awake during that time, and honestly couldn't remember sleeping at all during that particular trip. And neither could my grandma, but she claims it must have been a dream. I was convinced otherwise. I don't remember what proof I had for myself in that moment, but I do remember I had a feeling of I couldn't have been sleeping but I can't remember what it was. I'm thinking I had brought up a conversation that happened just moments before the incident, and my grandma could recall that. Her demeanor was weird, too. She immediately just said, "Oh, that was a dream. You were dreaming." Not, "You must have been dreaming," or something. It was stated as a fact. Knowing my grandma, either response could have been just as genuine. But her quickness to dismiss and her demeanor seemed like she knew exactly what I was talking about and wanted to squash any further questions. And that is really interesting. Not only what this kid saw, but the grandmother's reaction to what the kid saw, and then remembering or not remembering. Um, but uh, but yeah, I don't know. That's a really interesting one there. Oh, hello. I see we have someone else in chat. Thank you for being here, Jen. But yeah, so I found that, and that's really a really interesting one. I don't know what to make of that. It's almost like maybe, I mean, there are basically, I think, two options. Either the grandma was not telling the truth in order to not frighten the child more, or if there was some kind of, because they seem like something maybe possibly magical. Maybe there was some kind of, I don't know, mind, some kind of mental, some kind of telepathy done from these things to the grandma, where they kind of fogged her memory or erased her memory of the event, which is even more frightening in a way. Um, so I don't know what to make of that. Um, but yeah, I thought that was just interesting. Oh, thank you, Jen. I'm yeah, I had fun finding these. These were, and it's funny. I was kind of surprised I wasn't finding more just UFO stories, but these were all just as interesting, in their own way. So, but yeah, I don't know what to make of that one. But let's see here. How are we on time? Okay, I think we can do these last two. Um, okay, so this next one says, when I was a kid at night, only in the dark, I would see neon green dots all over the room. Occasionally, there would be bright red dots floating within the green dots. These were about the size of a pinpoint. I only saw those dots when growing up in my childhood home. I thought that I was crazy. I lived in that house with my until I was 8 and moved out when my parents split. I am now 33 and was talking with my sister the other night, excuse me, and I told her about seeing these things. Her face went ghost white, and she said that she too saw those dots, and only when we lived in that house. Never since. What could they have been if not paranormal? So, sounds like maybe orbs, possibly. Um, but that's interesting, APOC. It says I've heard of green ghostly body parts before. Not sure if they were neon. Brings you back to one of my first experiences, although they weren't neon either. But yeah, just the idea of all these dots floating in a room. I've had one or two times, well, a couple of times, when laying in bed here in this apartment where I saw like just a handful of dots, just lights, kind of slowly fade in or appear, and then fade out in the space like up near the ceiling above me in my bed as I was laying there trying to get to sleep. Um, so I don't know what to make of that. It's really interesting. I've been talking with people lately. I know APOC is one of the people I've been talking with about just the idea of what are orbs or what are these lights that people see. I mean, it seems like they can be any number of things. So, which just makes it all the more confusing. Um, but it's good in a way that the writer of that story at least got verification of similar events happening in the same time frame and the same house. So, but yeah, as to what it is, it's hard to say. Um, but yeah, so move on to this last story here. I think it's a good one to end on. This says, this is not a ghost story, but it is definitely a bizarre event that happened to me and that after many years I still cannot explain. I was about 7 years old. It was summer, and we were in the usual place that we had always frequented from July to August. So I guess like a vacation home. That day, I remember that I had to learn to use the bicycle, and so I asked my mother if I could go to the yard to try. My mother gave me the okay, and so I went. Just outside the building, I met a little older child, 10 or 11 years old, and he asked me if I lived there. In short, we didn't know each other, and he told me that he was the son of the two gentlemen who had rented the house next to ours with the street number 3. I guess it means address. I immediately understood who he was referring to, and we made friends. I told him that I had to learn to pedal the bike, and I had to practice. He replied that he could help me. Being older, he already knew how to carry it. We spent the whole afternoon pedaling the bike down a slope and then climbing it, climbing it, but climbing it, but being very unexperienced when when I happened to make the descent, I could not brake in time, and I tumbled. The boy was laughing, and so was I, to tell the truth, because in the in the end, I wasn't hurt. Anyway, the afternoon ended, and both the boy and I had to go and say goodbye. I went home and told my mother that I had met this child, and my mother understood who I was referring to, because the day before, she had talked to the gentleman who had rented that house, and she knew they had a son. The next day came. I woke up happy, knowing that I could spend another day having fun with my new friend. So I went down and knocked on the door in Villa number 3. And as soon as they opened the door, I asked them if their son was in the house. They looked at me with a very strange air, and then they answered me, saying that maybe I had the wrong door. They didn't have a son. So, thinking that I had misunderstood, I asked them if they had a nephew who had come to play yesterday. They said no, and so I said goodbye to them. You can't imagine my face at the moment. I wondered for who knows how long. Who did I play with yesterday? But the thing that troubled me is that my mother knew him. She had confirmed it to me the day before. So I went back home and I told my mother about the situation. I still remember her answer. She told me that yesterday I had not gone down. I had stayed at home playing with toys until evening. I told her about the boy in Villa number 3, but she didn't understand what I was talking about since they had no children. At this point, I was convinced it was a joke. I insisted so much that she got angry. I remember that I looked at my arms and legs to look for bruises due to the bike, but there was nothing. Also because I actually did not hurt myself falling. I swear to you, I still don't know what happened. I can't explain why the day before my mother knew about this family and the day after she didn't. I also checked in the following days, but nothing. I never saw that kid again. After 30 years, I still can't explain this story to myself. A hypnagogic dream? It may have been, or maybe, but I am sure it was all true. I remember that day very well, moment by moment. Colors, noises, smells, all of it. That child was from another house. And then, after the holidays, he went away? Okay, but why didn't my mother remember it anymore? Who was she referring to then when she told me about the family in Villa number 3? A journey into another dimension? A very fervent fantasy? A ghost? A misunderstanding? An extremely realistic dream? I don't know how to explain it. And I think that from that event, I started to be more mentally open to these stories and to those who tell them. So, that is quite the experience. Um, I almost wonder, they mentioned some kind of other dimensional experience, maybe? I have no idea, but it there's just really so many questions there about what happened there. Um, and the mom not knowing what was going on one day and then not knowing the next. Um, I don't know. They're saying that the writer, who was a kid then, had been inside all the day before, hadn't even gone outside. So, um, that's one of those stories where it kind of starts out normal, but then it just gets more and more um, strange and confusing as you go along. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to make of that one. They seem open to the idea that there's some regular explanation for it, but I do believe it's important to trust how you feel about events that have happened to you. I do when it comes to things that I've experienced, and they seem pretty sure that it was something paranormal. And just even if barring any of the regular explanations, which I don't know, um, if that was the case, that is does not sound like a fun experience to have, because especially when you're a kid, because you know what you experienced, and yet you have people that say that that couldn't have happened. And so, but if it was some kind of a, I don't know, other dimensional thing or parallel universe thing, maybe the mother really didn't know. And I mean, it doesn't seem like she knew, but maybe that's why she didn't know. Um, so, yeah, very that's a very lots of questions there, of course, with no answers to me anyway. Um, so yeah, I think since that's all the stories I found, I guess that's where we're going to end it. But I can't think of a better way to end an episode like this than with a story like that. Um, but yeah, APOC, I agree. I don't like it when kids get dismissed. I agree. That's for sure. It's it's hard. Even myself as a kid. I mean, I remember talking to my family here and there just once or twice. I didn't really go into it a lot, but about my experiences with my family, and they really, at least initially, they did not want to hear about it. So, but yeah. So that's it for tonight. But thank you all for being here. Tomorrow night, I'll be sharing true ghost stories from the web. I already got those picked out, and so we'll be going through those. Wednesday will be more comic books and the paranormal with Derek, the Night Stalker. And Thursday will be another book review episode. Friday we'll continue talking about haunted sports arenas. Um, so, and that's basically the plans for the week. So, take care. Have a great night, everyone. And I will talk to you tomorrow night on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal.